Arctic Roll, a roll and write with a cold draft. In Arctic Roll, you manage a band of hunters exploring the Arctic wastes. Choosing dice from passing dice flows, you must use them to move around the ice, to dig ice holes where you can fish, and to position your hunters beside the holes or beside areas of open water. But beware, each round you will also be forced to choose a calamity dice, which your opponents will place onto your ice sheet in order to cause you the maximum inconvenience. Polar bears will chase hunters away so they can't hunt. Walruses will eat fish in the adjacent areas of open water, so you cannot get extra fish there. And there is always the danger of an ice chasm opening up and swallowing your best laid plans. This is your player sheet, which you will write on as you draft dice. On the left is the ice sheet which your hunters must explore. You will move your piece around this area and write the result of each dice drafted here. On the right is the player aid, a useful reminder of what each drafted dice allows you to add to the sheet. It also shows the calamities associated with each number. Calamities are minor inconveniences which will be written onto your ice sheet by your neighbours. To set up your ice sheet, pass it to your neighbour, who rolls 2 die, 1 black, 1 white. Using the black dice first, they count round from the centre to draw an area of open water onto your sheet 2 hexes away from the central hex. They repeat this with the white dice to create a second hex of open water beside the first. A second area of open water is created in the same way, but the first of these 2 hexes is occupied by a walrus signified by a W. Of course, you will do the same on your neighbour's sheet, before everyone passes the player sheets back. Roll 6 white dice, placing them on a dice flow in front of you. The start player also rolls 1 black dice for each player onto the grey dice flow, and places it in the middle of the table where all players can see them. Finally, you place your player meeple on the central hex on your player sheet. You are now ready to begin the game. In order to see how the game works, we're going to zoom in on one area of the ice sheet and watch the red player play through a round of drafting 6 dice. Blocked by an area of open water, the red player chooses a 5 from the first dice flow. They then immediately draw 1 hole under the meeple and 4 dots around the hole to represent the hunters. The dice flow is then passed round to the next player. The next dice flow arrives and the red player drafts a 4, using it for movement. All movement must be in a straight line and must be used completely. Movement may not cross open water and must also finish on an empty hex. Landing on the cube symbol gives the player one of 3 bonuses that they can use at any time in the future. This cube gives the player an extra virtual dice of any value they choose that they can use at any time. One player has chosen not to use the dice they drafted this turn, and has the first choice of the black calamity dice which they remove from the dice flow. The next dice drafted is a 1, and the player draws an ice hole underneath their meeple. Another of the calamity dice is taken by another player. The red player has a plan to use one of the bonuses and drafts a 3 for movement. Another player chooses another calamity. Drafting a 3, the player draws an ice hole and then adds 2 hunters. One of the hunters is written over a bonus hex, allowing the player to mark the fact that they now have access to an igloo. Drafting their final dice of the round, the player has no choice but to take a 2. This will not be used, as they have yet to take a calamity dice. As they are not the first player, another player chooses a calamity before them, taking the black 1, and leaving the player to choose a 4 or a 5. They take the 4, leaving the 5 for the last remaining player. Before they hand over their ice sheet to their neighbour for the calamity to be added, the red player decides to use both the bonuses they have collected. They use the igloo to add 6 hunters around the hole they dug earlier, and they use the free virtual dice to add 4 more hunters to their current location. At the end of the round, all players pass their ice sheets to their neighbours for their calamity to be added. The green player has to add a walrus adjacent to another open water hex. They decide to place it just below the red meeple, chasing fish from the adjacent water hex, but also restricting the movement of the red meeple on the next turns. This is the end of the first round. A full game consists of 6 rounds, but if we were at the end of the game, you would score as follows. First, score each ice hole by counting the number of hunters beside it able to fish there. Each hunter scores 1 point. The first hole has 6 hunters, scoring 6 points. The second also has 6, and the third has just 4 hunters, scoring 4 points, totaling 16 points for hunters around ice holes. The open water area would have scored 4 points, but the walrus has chased fish away from one of the hexes, so 2 of the hunters do not get an additional opportunity to fish. Just 2 of them can fish the open water, giving a further 2 points. This gives a total score of 18 points. This is the end of the first round. The full game is 6 rounds. Each subsequent round begins with players re-rolling 6 white dice, and the black dice being passed around to a new start player. As the ice sheet fills up, it becomes increasingly difficult to move around and place hunters and holes, and bodies of open water, initially a potential source of extra points, can restrict movement further. So that is Arctic Roll, a roll and write with a cold draft. The visually intuitive use of dice makes it easy to pick up, and the reverse hate draft of calamities adds interest. If you're interested in this game, contact Ian at the Games People, or download the print and play from the Games People website.